ja, so Zombie-Filme gucke, Zombie-Serien gucke und deshalb ist es halt doppelt relevant für mich, weil auf dem Thumbnail ist Will Z. Ich weiß nicht, ob ihr den Film kennt. Das ist einer der schlechtesten Zombie-Filme überhaupt. Und vielleicht habe ich jetzt einen Grund, den Film doppelt zu hassen oder sogar noch mehr. Gehen wir rein.
The first award presented at the 50th Academy Awards was for Best Supporting Actress. The 1977 film Julia, starring Jane Fonda, had overall 11 nominations, including for Best Picture, Best Director, and Fonda was herself nominated for Best Actress. She didn't win, but her co-star Dame Vanessa Redgrave took home the award for Best Supporting Actress. It was a whirlwind year for Redgrave. While Julia was warmly received, another film she was in that year drew a very different reaction. It was a documentary she produced herself called The Palestinian. Filmed amid the civil war in Lebanon, Redgrave travels to the Palestinian refugee camps in the country and speaks to Palestinian politicians, refugees, and fighters. She interviewed Yasser Arafat, leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization, giving him ample time to articulate the Palestinian cause. For her film, Redgrave was the target of a sabotage and harassment campaign by the Jewish Defense League, led by Meir Kahane. JDL members picketed theaters that played the film and even released mice into at least...
What the fuck? Ey, die hatten ja noch nie Probleme, total over the top zu sein, oder? The fuck? Schlechte Zombie-Filme sind die besten. Ja, aber das war halt schlecht also wirklich schlecht. Nicht im Sinne von irgendwie Trash, was sehr geil ist, sondern was schlecht, weil es so hochproduziert war. Was soll ich in den Titel schreiben? Israel im Film oder so? Also der Titel heißt Israel im Film. Du kannst auch israelische Propaganda im Film schreiben, I don't know. Ich weiß nicht, ob es genau, also ich meine, es geht anscheinend auch um die Menschen, die halt andere Sichtweisen zeigen wollen.
one of them. Another theater was bombed, which took place after the Oscars.
What the
When
fuck?
Redgrave arrived at the Oscars, she saw her likeness hanged in effigy by JDL members who apparently lit it on fire. Police reportedly told her a local JDL leader offered $500 for the ear of the Nazi. I made this film because I believe
The fuck? Israel im Film, das muss reichen. Ja, es ist schon okay. Also sie hat einen Film gedreht und die IDF ist schon da apeshit gegangen, hat einfach Theater angegriffen und hat gesagt, wir setzen eine Belohnung aus, um ein Ohr von ihr zu bekommen und haben sie Nazi genannt, nur weil sie eine Dokumentation über Palästinenser gedreht hat. Alles klar.
the Palestinian people have been
Typical.
denied the right to be heard, Redgrave said in defense of her movie.
And I salute you, and I pay tribute to you, and I think you should be very proud that in the last few weeks you've stood firm, and you have refused to be intimidated by the threats of a small bunch of Zionist hoodlums whose behavior is an insult to the stature of Jews all over the world and to their great and heroic record.
Ja. Brüllöwen, ich wusste das nochmal.
Denied the right to be heard, Redgrave said in defense of her movie.
And I salute you, and I pay tribute to you, and I think you should be very proud that in the last few weeks you've stood firm, and you have refused to be intimidated by the threats of a small bunch of Zionist hoodlums whose behavior is an insult to the stature of Jews all over the world and to their great and heroic record of struggle against fascism and oppression.
her words Zionist hoodlums, referring directly to the JDL. Years later, she wept, remembering the Oscars speech. The Academy president, Howard Koch, said that after the ceremony, I felt sorry for Vanessa. At the party afterward, she was sitting all alone with just her 2 bodyguards. No one would sit with her, and here it was her big night. Henry Ehrlich, the publicist assigned to escort...
Ja, das sind halt alles rückgratlose Bastarde, ne? Also, I'm sorry. Aber geil, dass sie so stark ist. Also.
Redgrave wrote to the Los Angeles Times explaining how he confronted her. As a film industry publicist, I was assigned to escort Vanessa Redgrave to the various press and media gathered on the 4th floor at the Music Center. I turned to her and congratulated her for the award, and I also made a very simple but direct statement. I have been an ardent Zionist and supporter of Israel for more than 30 years. I do not consider myself a hoodlum. It was an anti-Semitic statement, he said. The charges of anti-Semitism were especially unfair considering David Lehrer, longtime director of the Anti-Defamation League for the West Coast, later called the JDL thugs and hooligans. Apparently, not a single Hollywood star came out.
Krass, wie lange die das schon versucht haben mit diesem Antisemitismus-Framing.
Out in defense of Redgrave. One would think her Julia co-star Jane Fonda, famously photographed with North Vietnamese troops atop an anti-aircraft gun, would show her support. Instead, she publicly criticized her for years. In 1980, she traveled to an IDF outpost in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights of Syria and gave an interview to the Israeli Maariv, where she denounced Redgrave's views as crazy. In fact, in December 1982, following Israel's invasion of Lebanon, the siege of Beirut, the Sabra and Shatila...
What the fuck? Alter, Ja, das ist wirklich Bully-Stuff, ne? Also Israel benimmt sich wie ein extremer Bully, wie so ein Cry-Bully, macht immer alles kaputt, greift die ganze Zeit andere an und dann wenn jemand sagt, hey, das ist nicht so cool, dann heult er rum und sagt so, ja, ich bin nur böse, weil die böse oder so. Es ist wirklich verrückt. Und der Westen ist einfach auf der Seite von Israel und sagt, ach, du armer Cry-Bully, du armer. Ja, der darf das auch.
Massacres, and with the ongoing occupation of southern Lebanon, Fonda declared her unqualified support of Israel. She condemned the double standard which has been applied to Israel over the war in Lebanon.
Fuck, ey.
And said she attributed this in part to anti-Semitism, as well to the tendency of many individuals to have knee-jerk reactions on behalf of third world nations.
Was ist, what the fuck? Wie weiß willst du sein? Ja. Also natürlich ist es ein doppelter Standard. Aber das ist doch, also die Sache zeigt doch gerade hier einen doppelten Standard. Dass wir für Menschen aus der dritten Welt, ich zitiere, ne, weniger Sympathien haben sollen. Und das hat nichts mit Antisemitismus zu tun. Holy shit. Ist Jane Fonda auch jüdisch? Wurde die auch dahin eingeladen, um sie zu brainwashen und so?
Israel, she said, is surrounded by a sea of fanaticism. These countries...
What the fuck? Oh mein Gott. Das ist ja voll die Propaganda, ey.
These are against women, against democracy, and every right we hold dear, and they're anti-Semitic. In any case, despite her being celebrated for her fraternizing with North Vietnamese troops, she later said she made a huge mistake that made a lot of people think I was against the soldiers. Needless to say, Redgrave's documentary was completely out of the realm of possibility for any major studio. When you think of big-budget films and their depictions of the Palestine conflict, or Arabs and Muslims generally, what do you imagine? Do they contain Palestinian leaders explaining at length their cause and why they fight? Are they humanized or dehumanized?
Yeah.
That Redgrave was completely alone at the after party after...
Ich weiß, worauf das hinausläuft mit World War Z, ehrlich gesagt. Und ich freue mich schon drauf, weil tatsächlich ist das mit dem Dehumanizing da nochmal auf eine ganz andere Spitze getrieben.
Winning Best Supporting Actress is telling. It appears to illustrate a near unanimous condemnation of, or at least a fear to speak out in support of, Redgrave's sentiment. A sentiment born out of her Palestine activism and subsequent harassment. Why did nobody in Hollywood come to her defense? We're all well aware of how small the number of pro-Palestine voices there are in the industry, the consequences that people face for speaking out, and the bias in movies that have long been pro-Israel and outright propagandistic. Indeed, some films have been made with the expressed purpose of serving as propaganda, which we'll see shortly. The Israeli government has provided assistance to a number of big-budget films, some that have had a lasting impact. When the Palestine conflict is covered, Israelis are typically victims, and even when they commit excesses, it's for the greater good in the end. The ends justify the means. The Palestinians, on the other hand, fight without moral principles, are unreasonable, impractical, and bloodthirsty. Films have shaped how Americans view Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, terrorism, and the U.S.-Israel relationship. It seems clear that the image of...
Was hat denn das Hakenkreuz da zu suchen? Mir wurde mal beigebracht, wenn ich aus einer Gruppe von 10 Leuten die einzige bin mit gegensätzlicher Faktenlage, dann werden sehr wahrscheinlich auch keine Fakten falsch sein.
Israel as a strategic asset of the United States was, at least in part, manufactured by Hollywood with the active assistance of the Israeli government. That
Ja. Es ist halt indoktriniert, ne? Dass Israel, ja.
might sound like
Israel, dass man Israel braucht, um irgendwie jüdisches Leben zu schützen. Meanwhile sollten wir doch einfach überall jüdisches Leben schützen.
a conspiracy theory, but it is well documented, particularly in Hollywood and Israel, A History, by Tony Shaw of the University of Hertfordshire and Israeli historian Giora Goodman of the Kinneret College on Lake Tiberias.
Okay.
The book draws extensively on the Israeli State Archives, IDF archives, U.S. State Department records, and numerous collections of personal papers from figures in both the American and Israeli film industries. It's an impressive work of scholarship, whatever the underlying sympathies of its authors. It's worth reading to understand what Hollywood produced and released for theaters in America and indeed around the world about Israel, Muslims, and terrorism, and how those films covered Palestinians. Hey everybody, due to the content of my videos, I'm not advertiser friendly, so if you want to support my work, consider becoming a patron for access to exclusive content and the GDF Discord server. I also accept donations. Thank you so much to everyone who has become a patron and donated. Love you all, thank you. Hollywood's first feature-length film about the birth of Israel was released in 1949. It was called
Ach, meine, nicht keine. Ach so, also. Ja, okay, das macht mehr Sinn.
Sword in the Desert from Universal International Pictures, directed by George Sherman. Though, according to Goodman and Shaw, Sword in the Desert's chief creator was Robert Buckner, a Gentile who both wrote and produced the movie inspired by a short story he had penned after visiting Palestine while a journalist in the mid-1930s. Arabs are largely subtracted from the story of Israel's creation, the pair write. Though Arab characters do appear, they do so only fleetingly. They hardly speak, but simply spit on the ground, and are presented as lazy, foolish, and determined to wipe out the Jews. Interestingly, the film revolves around the conflict between the Zionist forces and the British. Israeli officials were pleased with the film, recognizing its propaganda value. Reuven Daphne was the first Israeli consul in Los Angeles, a well-placed liaison between Hollywood and the Israeli government. Moshe Perlman was an Israeli military spokesman, But perhaps more importantly, write Goodman and Shaw, he was Israel's most important Hasbara official in its early years. Sword in the Desert was a rather mediocre picture, Reuven Daphne confided to Moshe Perlman, but one which, quote, will do us a tremendous service wherever it's shown. Gershon Agron.
Das ist krass, ey. Wie die einfach mit dieser Propaganda über Filme geplant haben.
Now head of all the Israeli government's domestic information services, congratulated Daphne for his part in the film, underscoring the role that Israeli government officials had in American-made films about Israel. Indeed, the Israeli consul had several script conversations with the director. The first American film to be set in Israel and made there was The Juggler, starring Kirk Douglas. This film covered not the war, but a Jewish refugee's journey to Palestine, emblematic of the fledgling state's mass absorption of immigrants. The story of The Juggler was created by Michael Blankfort, a New York-born Jewish screenwriter and novelist. Daphne told Perlman that the author should be given as much help as possible to turn out a good script. Blankfort subsequently spent 2 months touring Israel. In 1951, the film rights to the novel were sold to Stanley Kramer, who produced the film. But there was probably no force that linked the United States and Israel more firmly in the 1950s than the sense of partnership in a common Judeo-Christian civilization. And Hollywood played a crucial role in forging this joint mission through...
Ich mach mal hier die Untertitel nach oben, ne? Weil sonst lest ihr die ja doppelt, glaube ich.
The production of blockbuster biblical and ancient world films. In these, the ancient people of Israel were romanticized as invincible heroes, sagacious kings, fiery prophets, and God-fearing folk. Their enemies, Philistines, Egyptians, Romans, were depicted as godless heathens and power-hungry dictators. Cecil B. DeMille's biblical epics made millions of dollars for Barney Balaban's Paramount in the late 1940s and 1950s. DeMille was, of course, the master of the genre. His Samson and Delilah, released in 1949, cost a whopping $3 million. The film was a smash hit, winning 2 Oscars. The script was partly based on the novel Judge and Fool by Ze'ev Jabotinsky, founder of revisionist Zionism, from which the Irgun and Lehi paramilitaries emerged. Jabotinsky was even listed as a scriptwriter in the credits, long dead at this point. 10 years later came Ben-Hur, which won 11 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Actor, and Best Director, awarded to William Wyler. Goodman and Shaw write of the film, publicity for Ben-Hur heavily emphasized the choice of Israeli actor Haya Harari as Ben-Hur's love interest, Esther.
Haya Harari, Israeli actress who was cast as Esther.
Further encouraging viewers to link America and Israel and
Okay, das wusste ich gar nicht. Also ich kenne Ben-Hur, aber...
the ancient Hebrews with those who now lived in the Jewish state. In addition, in making the most of the alliance between Ben-Hur and the Arab sheikh Ildirim, the movie projected on screen 2 important and recurring Israeli propaganda themes: the Jewish state's claim to an anti-colonial heritage on the one hand, and its quest for regional cooperation with friendly Arab neighbors on the other.
No, I just wanted you to know that I'm a Jew. This is my country.
It is hard to imagine anything conveying the Zionist claim to the land of Israel-Palestine more movingly or forcefully than this famous romantic scene in Otto Preminger's Exodus. Goodman and Shaw write, released in 1960 and starring one of Hollywood's greatest heartthrobs, to quote the pair, Exodus was based on the book of the same name by Baltimore native Leon Uris. During the 1948 war, Uris told his sister that if he wasn't married, he'd be in Palestine shooting Arabs. Uris sought to write a book specifically for an American audience for Israel to receive understanding.
I have been particularly blessed as a writer to see my book Exodus gain world support for the new state of Israel nearly 4 decades ago. Although it accomplished everything I had hoped for it, I never, in my wildest fantasies, believed that my words would reach out like a rainbow over time and space to the lost tribe of Israel entombed in the Soviet Union, where it underwent dozens of underground translations and became a powerful catalyst in reuniting the Jews of the Soviet Union with their history, the Jews in the outside world, and in stirring tens of thousands to make Aliyah.
To do this, he was assisted by the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Indeed, write Goodman and Shaw, they were willing to provide all possible assistance to the project. The Los Angeles consul provided him with reading materials and documentaries and a crash course for a trip to Israel. The Foreign Ministry assigned an official from their Hasbara department to escort him around the country, coordinating meetings with political and military leaders and settlers. They even convinced him to stay in Israel to write his first draft. A senior Foreign Ministry official, Moshe Lashem, helped Leon greatly with the editing of the draft, said his wife Betty. The book was enormously successful, boasting 2 million copies sold in the first year alone. In an Israeli cabinet meeting in March 1959, Goodman and Shaw write, Foreign Minister Golda Meir reported that the novel, which according to everyone contains a lot of kitsch, was more influential than 60 years of Zionist and Israeli propaganda. Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion agreed that it was a first-rate propaganda book. Israeli officials then helped turn the book into a film. The Israeli consul in Los Angeles, Yaakov Avnon, pressed Israeli officials back home to provide the movie with all possible logistical help, as no one knew when such a chance, quote, would fall in our hands again. So,
Es ist verrückt, oder? Also, ich finde das so krass. Also diese Propaganda ist quasi schon seit den 1940ern auch quasi in der amerikanischen Kultur vorhanden. Geil.
organized was this Israeli cooperation with the film that the Israeli government called...
Also ich habe das Gefühl... Ich höre schon nicht mehr zu. Wieso hörst du schon nicht mehr zu? Ich habe das Gefühl, ich muss diese ganzen Filme nochmal gucken, weil... Also ich habe nicht alle gesehen, aber Ben Hur habe ich mir vergessen.
their efforts Operation Exodus. The Israeli army supplied dozens...
Fucking Jade. Ja, das ist schon sehr, ich sag mal, sehr monoton, die Sprechart. Aber ich finde es halt trotzdem irgendwie, I don't know.
of
Die Filmszenen sind auch interessant.
trucks, equipment, and groups of soldiers to act as British military units. This was the first time that the army had allowed soldiers to participate in a film. Otto Preminger, who directed Exodus, went further than even Uris's book in absolving the Jews of any guilt associated with the 1948 war, especially regarding the Arab refugee issue. In the film, an invented character named Barak Ben Canaan makes a speech appealing to Arabs not to leave their homes.
We implore you, remain in your homes and in your shops, and we shall work together as equals in the free state of Israel.
In reality, of course, the real-life leader of the new state, David Ben-Gurion, personally ordered expulsions, including one of the single largest at Lida Ramla, and even balked at the sight of Palestinians in the city of Nazareth, asking why they hadn't been expelled yet. Expulsion operations were also referred to as cleansing repeatedly.
Das ist so krass, ne? Dass die Nakba und so positiv dargestellt werden. So, ja, die wollten das, die haben das gefeiert. Und dann verknüpfen das Menschen tatsächlich.
In a remarkable example of the contacts between the Israeli government and the cast and crew, the film's lead Paul Newman wrote to Teddy Kollek, Director General of the Prime Minister's office, calling the movie a smash. It will turn out very much like the book. Not necessarily accurate, but excellent propaganda.
Excellent Propaganda, die wussten das auch alle, dass das Propaganda ist. Das ist so verrückt, ey.
As Goodman and Shaw conclude about the film's impact, as the years passed, Exodus became for many people, especially Americans, the definitive account of both the origins of the Jewish state and of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Years after its release, it was shown on national television before becoming a regular fixture on cable TV. In the 1970s, a shift occurred in Hollywood's depictions of Israel from biblical epics and the 1948 war to more contemporary stories. These came principally in one form, the threat of Arab, mainly Palestinian terrorism. This continued through the 1980s. In 1972 came the dramatic attack on Israel's Olympic team in Munich by the Palestinian Black September group. The spectacle of this event, which was aired on television, inspired a number of novels and films. The Israeli government assisted with these as well. In 1975, Exodus director Otto Preminger had another movie out called Rosebud. This one centered around a kidnapping plot by Black September in Europe. The crew received help from the Israeli Army and Navy. Preminger is known to us as a friend in heart and soul, Israel Salmon, the new head of the Israeli Film Center, assured Moshe Dayan, Israel's defense minister from 1967 to 1974. Rosebud would, Preminger had told him, contribute to the denunciation of the terrorist movements and the states that cooperate with them. Goodman and Shaw observe how Rosebud extols the virtue of the U.S.-Israeli partnership by centering on a CIA agent, Larry Martin, played by Peter O'Toole, who foils the Black September plot by allying with Israel's security agency Shin Bet.
Okay.
This movie, however, bombed. In 1976 came the Entebbe raid, which caused a media frenzy, with at least 17 companies vying for their own piece. 2 made-for-TV movies, cheap but star-studded, were aired in the following months. Goodman and Shaw described the fervor. The morning after the Israeli raid, the head of Warner Brothers, Ted Ashley, telephoned the Israeli ambassador to the United States, proposing to make a major movie about the wonderful operation that would be first-rate public relations for Israel, on par with a new Exodus, if not more than that. Lou Wasserman, Universal Studios boss, tried to steal a march on his competitors by cabling Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Barry Diller, chairman of Paramount Pictures, sought to clear a path for his company's project by informing Israel's UN ambassador that he had signed contracts already for an Entebbe film. But ABC won the race, airing Victory at Entebbe in December 1976, a movie seen by over 40 million people. NBC's Raid on Entebbe aired the following month, seen by 60 million people. Regarding the political leanings of the creators of the films, Goodman and Shaw write, production records show that many of those involved in the making of Victory at Entebbe and Raid on Entebbe were committed pro-Zionists determined to present Israel as a leader in the West's fight against Arab cum international terrorism.
Ja. Das ist verrückt, ne? Also ich glaube, also mir ist das schon sehr irgendwann mal aufgefallen, so dass das immer so diese muslimisch gelesenen Feinde sozusagen sind in diesen Filmen, in Actionfilmen vor allem, in Actionspielen. Aber mir ist das, ich hatte da, glaube ich, noch nie so drüber reflektiert, dass Israel dann immer als Held so dargestellt wurde. Also mir war so, es fällt jetzt so krass auf, ne, irgendwie. Aber es ist halt das Problem bei Propaganda. Sie ist halt unterschwellig und sie funktioniert.
Both the chief financier of Victory at Entebbe, ABC's president Leonard Goldenson, and its creative overseer, David Wolper, were longtime friends of Israel. Wolper had made a seminal pro-Zionist TV documentary, Let My People Go, The Story of Israel, in the mid-1960s, and received help from Israeli Defense Minister Shimon Peres in making Victory at Entebbe. In 1977 came the film Black Sunday, which was, according to Goodman and Shaw, the first American terrorism blockbuster. Interestingly enough, before writing the Hannibal Lecter series, Thomas Harris wrote a novel about a Palestinian plot to blow up the Super Bowl. This was made into a movie. Early in the following decade came the ABC miniseries Masada, the location of the fortress where Judean rebels held out against the Roman Empire for 4 years. The rebels finally chose death over surrender, committing mass suicide. The fortress has now become a symbol of Israeli nationalism and, for years, served as the site of Israeli Defense Forces swearing-in ceremonies. The network hoped to recreate the massive success of the series Roots, which followed the enslaved Kunta Kinte. Write Goodman and Shaw, unsurprisingly, the Israeli authorities got fully behind Masada, which had a budget twice the size of Roots. Prime Minister Menachem Begin met the producers personally to discuss the importance of the Zealots' revolt. Its opening scenes show Israeli soldiers ascending Masada. The movie The Delta Force, starring Chuck Norris, was produced and directed by Israelis, Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus. The Israeli military were especially delighted at the opportunity presented by the film. Goodman and Shaw unearthed a communique from Lieutenant Colonel Oznat Mardor, head of Hasbara for the IDF, to spokesperson Brigadier General Ephraim Lapid. The film projects a patriotic American tone in which Israel appears as a loyal friend of the United States, the IDF Media Relations Department concluded prior to production. And there is no doubt that in Hasbara terms, Operation Delta will work in favor of Israel. Additionally, according to other state and IDF archives, Moshe Levi...
Ich habe auch gerade gedacht, so, also ist ja nicht nur ein Rechtsextremer, der halt für Trump plädiert, sondern, also gut, war der auch schon rechtsextrem? Also, I don't know, vielleicht, also, keine Ahnung, ob er dahinter steht, hinter Zionism, aber würde mich jetzt nicht überraschen, ehrlich gesagt.
IDF Chief of Staff, and Yitzhak Rabin, Minister of Defense, all concurred. IDF spokesperson Lapid particularly liked the way that the script for the Delta Force presented Israel as a strategic asset to the United States. The military provided helicopters, fighter jets, and a submarine. Chief of Staff Levy insisted on thorough checks of the scripts and final cut to ensure that the film did not accidentally reveal any top-secret information. Crucially, Goodman and Shaw write, one message is that Arab terrorists are sadistic fanatics with whom it is impossible to reason. Another is the virtues of the U.S.-Israel relationship. An American general in the film proclaims,
Israel is America's best friend in the Middle East, and it's only 20 minutes from Beirut. You're going to get anything and everything you want to do it right. The president wants those people home.
So do we, General. So do we.
Israel is America's best friend in the Middle East. 10 years later, Warner Brothers release Executive Decision starring Kurt Russell.
May I help you? Hayat Fal Philistine. Wabushnia. Listen to the sound of Altar.
A couple of years later, The Siege, directed by Edward Zwick for 20th Century Fox, is released. The film features Denzel Washington and Bruce Willis.
White Supremacy, ja. Sprich Deutsch, du? Was willst du? Ach so. Ich weiß, wer das der Clip ist, wie man
Working against sleeper cells bombing New York. One of their leaders is a Palestinian American whose brother has suicide bombed a Tel Aviv movie theater.
These people, they bomb, they maim. They represent the Palestine you want to build. They're using you.
You are using me too. Everybody uses the Palestinians.
There is some discussion of Palestinian suffering in refugee camps, but all things considered, a Palestinian is bombing American civilians and is the source of all the trouble in New York. In a sign of a new complication in Hollywood's relationship with Israel, in 2005, Paradise Now becomes the first film by a Palestinian to be nominated for the Best Foreign Language Film Oscar. The film follows two Palestinian men preparing for a suicide bombing in Israel. The film was criticized, especially in Israel. Goodman and Shaw write, perhaps unconvincingly, that the Motion Picture Academy's support for a film like Paradise Now, in the face of opposition from Israeli and Jewish American organizations,
Treut Big Monte schon wieder. Hat halt den Freier so einen Clip reingeschickt.
shows that these were changing times in the Hollywood-Israel relationship. Though, as the pair show, Hollywood could reliably be used to bolster Israel's image when needed. Indeed, just a year before Paradise Now was released, the Israeli Foreign Minister Silvan Shalom spoke to no less than 70 Hollywood figures at Arnon Milchan's house. Milchan, who was in a previous life involved in arms dealing and espionage, went on to found Regency, known to many of you by their production logo. We'll talk more about Milchan shortly. The Los Angeles consul Yuval Rotem also organized star-studded solidarity delegations to Israel. In 2003, Christopher Reeve, Quentin Tarantino, and Whitney Houston were among those who visited. The attack at Munich in 1972 inspired a slew of movies about Palestinian terrorism, but it also had a profound impact on one of Hollywood's most famous directors. Steven Spielberg watched the drama unfold with his father, enraged that Jews were being killed on German soil once again.
Alter. Ich finde das halt so krass, ne? Weil das ist, also meanwhile darf Israel die ganze Zeit Anschläge an die Palästinenser machen.
As he described it. Despite being a heartrending and brutal story about the Holocaust, even Schindler's List conveys a pro-Israel message. Goodman and Shaw write, Schindler's List ends with a clear pro-Zionist message. In one of the final scenes, one of the Soviet soldiers who has liberated Schindler's Jews tells them that they are not wanted in either Eastern or Western Europe. The Jews are then seen walking across a...
Was fucking antisemitisch ist, ne? Nochmal, die Gründung von Israel war ziemlich antisemitisch.
...field with a hopeful gleam in their eyes as the unofficial 1967 war victory hymn, Jerusalem of Gold, is sung in Hebrew on the soundtrack. When the film was released in Israel, Spielberg attended the premiere with Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. But in 2006, Spielberg would get his chance to portray the story that he lived through and watched on television, an incident that particularly enraged him. Munich follows the aftermath, with the Israeli assassinations of Palestinians believed to be connected with the 1972 attack. The Israeli government, however, did not support the film and were not happy with its content, which they believed drew moral equivalency. There was significant criticism from American circles as well. One Samuel Friedman, professor of journalism at Columbia University, even called the film the Counter-Exodus, an anti-Zionist epic. Mitchell Baird previously edited the Near East Report.
Was machen Zios bitte, was nicht antisemitisch ist? True. Good point. APEC, Alter. Boah, ich hab Gänsehaut aus, aber ganz, ganz ekliges
The official
Gefühl.
organ of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. He then went on to head the American Israeli Cooperative Enterprise, which publishes the Jewish Virtual Library. Baird said that supporters of Israel that criticize the film only see the narrow elements that pertain to Israel and miss the larger picture. In the case of Munich, it is possible to pick apart scenes that portray Israel unflatteringly, but the overall feeling of the film is that the Arabs are savage murderers who deserve to be assassinated. It is hard to imagine many people coming away from the film feeling more sympathetic toward the Palestinians and less so toward Israel. Indeed, the film's creator was hardly anti-Zionist, and despite his attempts to portray moral complications...
I would die for Israel, okay. Oh boy. Aber es ist verrückt, ne, wie Israel auch Angst hat, wenn irgendwie auch nur irgendwas, was nah an der Realität, und ich meine, die sind ja brutal, die Einsätze von der IOF, Entschuldigung. Das ist ja verrückt, ey.
With Israel's assassination of Palestinians, Spielberg fully supported it, as revealed in an interview he gave to Germany's Der Spiegel. The following decade saw numerous pro-Israel movies and television shows, especially with the ascent of Netflix. In 2011, Homeland premiered on Showtime, produced by Fox 21.
Oh, Homeland habe ich am Anfang sogar geguckt. Oh krass, daran kann mich gar nicht erinnern, dass da jemand mit Kufia gezeigt wurde, so. Aber ich habe auch, glaube ich, nur die erste Staffel gesehen.
The series was based on an Israeli series called Prisoners of War, created by Gideon Raff. Raff would serve as an executive producer for Homeland. The story was readapted to involve the CIA and the U.S. military.
The Showtime series hired street artists to give their set of a Syrian refugee camp a more authentic feel, but they flipped the script. tagging things like Homeland is racist and Homeland is a joke. Egyptian Heba Amin was one of the artists involved.
They don't have a thorough research team.
Here, the series depicts Beirut's Hamra Street as dangerous, full of violent militiamen. In reality, the strip in the Lebanese capital is famous for its cafes, restaurants, and nightlife.
Released in 2013, World War Z, the highest-grossing zombie movie of all time, can be read as an Israeli propaganda story. In the film, Jerusalem is the only city to survive the zombie onslaught.
Ach, stimmt. Das war in Jerusalem, wo die... Jo. Holy shit, zionistische Propaganda, scheiß Film.
Thanks to the ingenuity of Israeli intelligence, as explained by a friend.
Israeli intelligent. Okay, wait. Moment.
Released in 2013, World War Z, the highest-grossing zombie movie of all time, can be read as an Israeli propaganda story. In the film, Jerusalem is the only city to survive the zombie onslaught, thanks to the ingenuity of Israeli intelligence, as explained by a friendly Mossad officer. The depiction of a giant wall around the city, reminiscent of the real separation barrier between Israelis and Palestinians, is impossible to ignore. That the wall keeps out hordes of zombies while a multicultural society flourishes inside presents a striking Zionist narrative, albeit a particularly perverse one.
Da waren auch palästinensische Flaggen, okay. Ach du Scheiße. Passt, das Buch haben sie mit dem Film absolut entstellt. True, habe ich auch schon mal gehört. Also gut, dass ich den nicht kenne, das ist halt kein guter Zombie-Film. Also der ist wirklich nicht gut gemacht. Das ist halt, also was halt irgendwie eventuell ganz interessant ist, wenn man so wenn man Technicalities bei Zombies-Filmen interessant findet, ist halt, dass die sich sehr schnell verwandeln und übelst schnell sind und halt eine besondere Art haben, dass sie halt nur Menschen infizieren oder infizieren wollen, die nicht schon sterbenskrank sind. Das ist so. Aber mehr ist da jetzt auch. Also ich finde sonst die Story ist halt komplett uninteressant. Also who cares?
Netflix distributed a show about Israeli special forces in 2015 called Fauda. Gideon Raff wrote and directed The Red Sea Diving Resort, released on Netflix in 2019, continuing the positive portrayal of Mossad. The same year came The Spy, also released on Netflix, with Sacha Baron Cohen as the lead role of the real-life Israeli spy Eli Cohen. As Goodman and Shaw conclude of the show, The Spy is quite uncomplicated politically. Israel's enemies are aggressive and brutal. The 2010s showed more convincing signs of a complication between Hollywood and Israel, especially with the bombing, ground invasion, and destruction of some 18,000 homes in Gaza in 2014. Mark Ruffalo was in The Avengers 2 years prior and was well placed to criticize Israel, and he's done so since. Rihanna and Zayn Malik tweeted Free Palestine, Selena Gomez urged her followers to pray for Gaza, and John Legend sharply criticized the United States for its impotence. But some of the harshest criticism from A-list actors came from husband and wife Penelope Cruz and Javier Bardem, who accused Israel of genocide and extermination. They retracted their statement, however, following considerable backlash. Indeed, despite the
Oha. Ich wollte gerade sagen, ja, Base und jetzt, ja, nee, nicht based.
criticism from a select few, Goodman and Shaw write, Israel still had many friends in Hollywood's higher echelons. Chief among them, Israelis Haim Saban, a billionaire whose wealth comes largely from producing Power Rangers, and Arnon Milchan. Milchan produced King of Comedy and Once Upon a Time in America. He's longtime friends with De Niro. Pretty Woman, JFK, Natural Born Killers, LA Confidential, Fight Club, Gone Girl, Little Women, 12 Years a Slave and Birdman won him 2 Oscars, and The Revenant. His previous spycraft and arms dealing raised no eyebrows among Hollywood celebrities.
Didn't it ever raise an eyebrow in this town in terms of dual loyalty?
No, because let me explain something to you. In this town, there's only one loyalty, okay? In this town, there's only one politics. Doesn't matter whether you're blue or red, you're Democrat, you're an American, you're a Jew or a Gentile, nothing. There's only one. Hits. That's all that matters here. Profits, hits. Not to offend your audience, but nobody gives a shit. There's only one politics, there's only one religion in this town. Hits. Make hits.
Milchan's star power was especially useful for Israel's foreign ministry. Jacob Dayan, who was Israel's consul general to Los Angeles from 2007 to 2011, said Milchan played a key role in branding Israel. When you have such access to opinion shapers, this gives Israel a tremendous advantage. These are extremely influential people, and such access is an asset to Israel. I don't know many people who can bring Hollywood's entire A-list to their home like this. The situation today is, however, not unchanged from Israel's earlier years, as Goodman and Shaw conclude. At the famous Oscar ceremony back in 1978, Vanessa Redgrave had been a lone pro-Palestinian voice. In 2014, dozens of celebrities expressed pro-Palestinian sympathies. But the history tells the broader story. With so few Hollywood insiders and celebrities championing Palestinian and Arab rights during this period, it is not surprising to find so little evidence of support for those rights on the Hollywood big screen. Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching, and if you liked this video, be sure to subscribe for more content. Also, if you want to chat or talk about video ideas, become a patron to join the GDF Discord server. There's also exclusive content on my Patreon. Thanks, everyone.
Ja, gutes Video. Also ich hatte irgendwie nie so drauf geachtet früher, ne? Auf diese